My sister Sharon fled with my husband Keith, abandoning her sick son to me. 15 years later, they left, asking about the boy they left to die, until he entered, all grown up. Their shock was unforgettable. You won't believe this, but my own sister and my husband didn't just betray me, they abandoned a child, leaving him for dead. And for 15 long, agonizing years, I thought I'd never see justice for it. Until one ordinary day, in a supermarket dairy aisle, when everything came crashing down. It all started on a Tuesday, 15 years ago. I remember pulling into my driveway, the squeak of my car brakes a familiar sound. It was one of those crisp autumn evenings, the kind where the air smells like rain and fallen leaves. I was just exhausted. You know, that kind of deep in your bones tired that no amount of coffee can fix? My only ambition was to kick off my shoes, heat up some leftovers, and maybe watch some mindless TV. My sister, Sharon, was supposed to pick up her son, my sweet nephew Kyle. She'd been leaving him with me more and more often, and while I adored that boy, I'll admit I was looking forward to a quiet house. My husband, Keith, should have been home too, probably in the den, feet up, watching sports. But when I turned the key in the lock, the first thing that hit me was the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was a heavy, hollow silence that felt utterly wrong. No TV blaring. No dinner cooking. Nothing. Keith? I called out, dropping my purse. Sharon? I'm home. Only the echo of my own voice answered. A cold knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I walked through the living room, my sensible work heels sinking into the carpet. Everything was tidy. Too tidy. A magazine on the coffee table perfectly squared. Remotes lined up. Keith was many things, but he was not neat. That's when I saw him. Little Kyle. He was only 5 years old, all big, scared eyes and a mop of sandy blonde hair. He was curled up in the big armchair by the window, clutching a throw pillow so tightly his tiny knuckles were white. He wasn't crying. He was just watching me, waiting. My heart did a painful flip. I rushed over and knelt in front of him. Kyle, sweetie, where is everybody? Where's your mommy? He just stared at me, his lower lip trembling. He looked so small and lost in that huge chair. I smoothed his hair back, it was damp, like he'd been sweating. Is Uncle Keith here? I asked, my voice softer. He shook his head, a tiny, jerky movement. Then, without a word, he uncurled one hand from the pillow. He was holding a piece of paper, folded into a tight, crumpled square. He held it out to me. I took it from him. It was warm from his hand. For a second, I just looked at it, that knot in my stomach now a cold, hard stone of dread. I knew, with the kind of certainty that defies all logic, that whatever was written on that paper was going to change everything. And God, I was right. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the note. It was Sharon's handwriting. Big, loopy letters that always looked so cheerful, so carefree. But the words on the page were anything but. Brenda, I'm so sorry to do this in a letter. I know it's cowardly. By the time you read this, Keith and I will be long gone. We're in love, Bren. We have been for a while. We're going to start a new life somewhere we can be happy. I can't take Kyle with me right now. It's not the right environment for a child. I know you'll take care of him. You're better at it anyway. Please don't try to find us, Sharon. I read it once, then twice. The words swam, blurring into a meaningless jumble. It felt like a sick, twisted joke. My sister and my husband? It wasn't possible. We were family. Keith and I had been married for 10 years. We'd had our ups and downs, but I loved him. I thought he loved me. And Sharon? She was my baby sister, the one I was supposed to protect. My legs went weak. I sank onto the floor, the letter clutched in my hand. A buzzing started in my ears. I looked at Kyle, who was still watching me with those huge, solemn eyes. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling in the room. He understood disaster. My mind raced, trying to find any explanation other than the one staring me in the face. Maybe someone forced them. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. I stumbled into the kitchen, my hand shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I dialed Keith's number. Straight to voicemail. His cheery professional greeting felt like a slap in the face. I dialed Sharon's number. Straight to voicemail. Her giggly, singing message played. They were gone. Together. That's when I saw it. On the gleaming granite countertop, next to the fruit bowl, was a sheath of papers. I picked them up. The top page was a legal document, a petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce. And there, at the bottom of the last page, was his signature. Keith's familiar, confident scroll. He'd signed it. He had planned this. The cold stone of dread in my stomach shattered, and a hot, searing rage took its place. They hadn't just left. They had plotted. They had lied to my face day after day while they planned their great escape. I thought about the last few weeks. Keith being distant, working late. Sharon, always so full of drama, suddenly serene and calm. It all clicked into place. Each memory a new twist of the knife. Little Kyle padded into the kitchen behind me. He tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Brenda," he whispered, "Mommy and Uncle Keith went on a trip." I looked down at his innocent face, and the rage inside me dissolved into a wave of pure, gut-wrenching sorrow. How could they do this to him? How could a mother just leave her child behind like a piece of forgotten luggage? I scooped him up and held him tight, burying my face in his soft hair. He was all I had left of my family, and I was all he had. To understand the true cruelty of what Sharon did, you have to understand the lie she told me months before she disappeared. It was the foundation for her entire escape plan. A masterpiece of manipulation built on my love for her and my nephew. I remember the day so clearly. It was a Saturday in late spring. I was in my garden, trying to coax some life into my sad-looking tomato plants, when Sharon's car screeched into the driveway. She practically fell out of the driver's seat, her face pale and streaked with tears. My first thought was she'd been in an accident. "Sharon, what is it? What's wrong?" I cried, rushing over. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing hysterically. "It's Kyle," she choked out between gasps. "Oh God, Brenda, it's Kyle." I let her inside, my heart pounding. I sat her down at the kitchen table and made her a cup of tea, my hands shaking. Kyle was my world. If anything happened to him, I couldn't even finish the thought. Finally, after a few sips of tea, she calmed down enough to speak. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terror that I, in my naivety, believed was real. "The doctors, they ran some tests," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He has a rare blood disorder. It's terminal, Brenda." The teacup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the tile floor. I didn't even notice. "What? What are you saying?" They said he has 6 months. Maybe less." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with renewed sobs. 6 months? How am I supposed to watch my own baby die? I can't do it, Bren. I'm not strong enough. I see him, and all I can think about is that he's leaving me. Every cough, every time he says he's tired, it's killing me. I was completely and utterly devastated. For Kyle, this beautiful little boy whose life was being cut so tragically short. And for my sister, who was facing every parent's worst nightmare. I pulled her into a hug, letting her cry on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Sharon," I whispered, tears streaming down my own face. "We'll get through this. Whatever you need, I'm here. We'll get a second opinion. We'll find the best doctors. She pulled back, shaking her head. There's no point. They said it's definitive. There's no treatment. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Brenda, I can't. I can't be here to watch it. I know it sounds awful. I know I sound like a monster, but I can't. And then she delivered the line that sealed all our fates. Could you help me with him? Just for a little while? Let me have some time to process this. I just need a break from the constant reminder. Of course, I said yes. What else could I say? My sister was falling apart and her son was dying. I told her to bring him over whenever she needed a break. I would do anything to ease her burden. I had no idea that I wasn't easing her burden. I was becoming her escape route. She wasn't a grieving mother. She was a brilliant, cold-hearted strategist, and she had just played me perfectly. After that day, my home became Kyle's second home. At first, it was just for a weekend here and there. Sharon would drop him off on a Friday evening, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She'd hug me and thank me profusely, telling me I was a lifesaver. I just need to not think about it for a couple of days, you know, she'd say, her voice cracking. Just to feel normal again. And I believed her. I'd spend the weekend doting on Kyle, trying to fill his last few months with as much joy as possible. We'd go to the park, build magnificent Lego castles, and watch cartoons until we both fell asleep on the couch. He was a quiet, sweet boy, and he seemed to get tired very easily, which only confirmed Sharon's story in my mind. But then the weekends started getting longer. She'd drop him off on Thursday and not pick him up until late Sunday night. Then it became whole weeks. Her calls became less frequent. When I did manage to get her on the phone, she sounded distant, distracted. How are you holding up, Sharon? I'd ask, concerned. I'm fine, she'd answer, her voice flat. Just busy trying to keep my mind off things. My husband Keith was wonderful about it at first. Whatever your sister needs, Bren, he'd say, ruffling Kyle's hair. We're family. Looking back, his supportive act makes my stomach turn. He wasn't supporting me. He was facilitating his own affair. Every extra hour Kyle was with us was an extra hour he could be with Sharon. The unease started to creep in slowly. One evening, a friend of mine, Jessica, called for a chat. Hey, you'll never guess who I saw downtown, she said. Your sister Sharon. She was at that new wine bar, the Grapevine. She was with a group of people, laughing her head off. She looked like she was having the time of her life. I felt a cold prickle of confusion. Are you sure it was her? Positive. She was wearing that bright red dress you hate, Jessica laughed. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house for a long time. It didn't make sense. A grieving mother whose son only had a few months to live was out laughing at a wine bar? I tried to dismiss it. Maybe she was trying to force herself to be happy, just like she'd said. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The final straw came a few weeks before she left for good. She was supposed to pick Kyle up at 6 o'clock on a Sunday. By 9, she still hadn't shown up. She wasn't answering her phone. I was frantic with worry, imagining the worst. Finally, around midnight, her car pulled into the driveway. I met her at the door, my arms crossed. Sharon, where have you been? I was worried sick. She breezed past me, smelling faintly of perfume and wine. Oh, relax, Brenda. I lost track of time. She looked annoyed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Lost track of time? Your son is here. She turned to face me, her eyes cold. And he's fine, isn't he? Look, I have my own life to live, Brenda. I can't put everything on hold. That was when I knew something was terribly wrong. It wasn't about grief anymore. This was something else. This was abandonment happening in slow motion right before my eyes. And then came the night of the letter. The night the slow fade became a final, deafening silence. After the initial shock wore off, a strange kind of calm settled over me. It was the calm of a shipwreck survivor who finally realizes the ship is gone and the only thing left to do is swim. My marriage was over. My relationship with my sister was a lie. My old life had been burned to the ground. All I had left was the little boy sleeping in the guest room, his face peaceful in the soft glow of the night light. I tiptoed into his room and sat on the edge of the bed, just watching him breathe. His little chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. He looked so fragile, so innocent. He had no idea that his world had been just as shattered as mine. His mother was gone. The man he knew as his fun uncle was also gone. And he had taken a piece of my life with him. Tears I didn't even know I was holding back began to stream down my face. They weren't tears of rage anymore. They were tears for him, for this small, helpless child who had been used as a pawn and then discarded. Sharon hadn't just betrayed me. She had abandoned her own son. And Keith? Keith had enabled it. He had watched her neglect her child and said nothing, all so he could have what he wanted. In that moment, staring at Kyle's sleeping face, I felt a fierce, protective love swell in my heart. It was a love so powerful, it pushed aside my own pain. My grief was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. This little boy needed me. I reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. He stirred in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. I leaned down and whispered into the quiet of the room. It was a vow I promised to him and to myself. "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered, my voice thick with tears. "It's just you and me now. But I am never, ever going to leave you. I will always be here for you, Kyle. Always. I promise." He settled back into a deep sleep, and I stayed there for a long time, the weight of that promise settling onto my shoulders. It felt heavy, terrifying even. I was in my 40s, suddenly a single woman, and now a single mother to a child the world believed was dying. I had no idea how I was going to do it. The financial strain alone was daunting. My salary was steady, but it was meant for two people, not one person and a child with major medical needs. There was no discussion of child support. No talk of shared custody. There was just silence and a little boy sleeping in my guest room. But as I sat there in the dark, I knew one thing for sure: I would not fail him. I would pour every ounce of love and strength I had into giving him the best life possible, for whatever time he had left. My old life was over. My new one had just begun. The first few months were a blur of learning a new routine. Our quiet, orderly house was suddenly filled with the happy chaos of a 5-year-old. There were Lego bricks underfoot, cartoon theme songs stuck in my head, and a constant, low-level hum of anxiety about Kyle's health. I followed Sharon's instructions to the letter. She had left a note with a very short, very strange list of foods he would eat: strawberry jelly, bananas, and plain white bread with the crusts cut off. "It's all he eats," she'd snapped at me once, months before she left. "Don't even try to give him anything else. He'll just throw it up." So, I didn't. I made him little plates of bananas and jelly sandwiches. He ate them, but without any real enthusiasm. And he was always so tired. He'd have a burst of energy for 20 minutes and then just wilt, needing to lie down on the couch. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and he had dark circles under his eyes. Everything about him seemed to confirm the terrible diagnosis. But my gut told me something was wrong. It was more than just a feeling. It was a deep, primal instinct. A mother's instinct, I suppose. Even though I wasn't his mother by birth, I'd watch him listlessly pushing a toy car across the floor and I'd think, this isn't right. Children, even sick children, should have more spark. I started doing my own research. I spent hours online, late at night after Kyle was asleep, looking up rare blood disorders. Nothing I found matched his symptoms perfectly. There were always inconsistencies. The tipping point came one afternoon when I took him to the playground. He was so excited to go on the swings. I pushed him gently, and he giggled, his little legs kicking. But after less than 5 minutes, he asked to stop. "I'm tired, Aunt Brenda," he said, his voice a weary little whisper. He leaned his head against my side as we sat on the park bench, and he was asleep in minutes. That was it. I couldn't just stand by and watch him fade away. Sharon had said there was no point in a second opinion, but Sharon was a liar and a coward. I didn't trust a single word she'd ever said. The next day, I made an appointment. I didn't go to our local family doctor. I wanted fresh eyes, a top specialist. I found a highly recommended pediatric hematologist, Dr. Evans, at the city hospital. It was expensive. I had to use money I had been saving for years, a small inheritance my grandmother had left me. But it didn't matter. This was more important than any savings account. I bundled Kyle up and drove us downtown. I remember sitting in the waiting room, my hands clammy, my heart thudding against my ribs. Kyle was sitting on my lap, quietly looking at a picture book. I was terrified of what the doctor would say. A part of me was afraid he would confirm my worst fears. But a bigger part of me was screaming that this was the right thing to do. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. Dr. Evans was a kind-faced woman with sharp, intelligent eyes. She listened patiently as I explained the situation, stumbling over the words as I recounted the diagnosis Sharon had given me. I watched her face carefully, but it remained neutral, professional. Then she began her examination of Kyle. She was gentle and thorough, making him giggle as she checked his reflexes. She took his blood pressure, listened to his heart, felt the glands in his neck. After she was done, she sent us down the hall for blood tests. Kyle was brave, only wincing a little when the needle went in. We waited for what felt like an eternity. Finally, a nurse called us back into Dr. Evans's office. She had the results in her hand. My heart was in my throat. Dr. Evans looked at me, her expression serious. "Brenda," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I've reviewed Kyle's blood work. We ran a comprehensive panel." I held my breath. She took a deep breath. "I'm not sure where your sister got her information, but Kyle does not have a terminal blood disorder. He doesn't have any kind of blood disorder at all." The relief that washed over me was so intense, it almost made me faint. It was like a physical weight had been lifted from my chest. I started to cry, silent tears of joy streaming down my face. Kyle was going to live. He was going to be okay. But Dr. Evans wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her eyes full of a mixture of sympathy and anger. "However," she said, her voice dropping lower, "Kyle is a very sick little boy. His results are alarming. He's suffering from severe malnutrition. He's anemic and has significant vitamin and mineral deficiencies across the board." The room went cold again. Malnutrition. She looked at me pointedly. "This boy isn't dying, ma'am. He's starving." The word hung in the air between us. Starving. And in that instant, every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. His fatigue. His pale skin. His lack of appetite for anything other than sugar and starch. It wasn't a disease. It was neglect. Criminal neglect. The relief I had felt just moments before was replaced by a white-hot, blinding rage. Sharon hadn't just lied to me to get rid of her son. She had been systematically starving him. Whether out of ignorance or pure malice, I didn't know. And frankly, I didn't care. She had actively harmed him, endangering his life with her selfishness and deceit. That 6 months to live story wasn't just a lie to get me to take him. It was the potential outcome of her own parenting. My path forward was suddenly crystal clear. I was no longer just his caregiver. I was his rescuer. My consultation with a lawyer about the divorce papers Keith had left would have to wait. My first and only priority was to undo the damage my sister had done. I was going to save this little boy. I was going to give him a life, a real one, full of health and love and everything his own mother had denied him. The years that followed were a testament to the healing power of love and chicken soup. Literally. Armed with Dr. Evans's diagnosis and a detailed nutrition plan, I declared war on malnutrition. My kitchen, which had mostly been used for reheating takeout, became my command center. I bought cookbooks. I watched cooking shows. I learned the difference between a simmer and a boil. I became an expert on nutrient-dense foods. Every morning, I made a nourishing broth filled with vegetables, chicken, and herbs. At first, getting Kyle to eat was a battle. His body was so used to junk that real food tasted strange to him. He pushed the spoon away, his little face wrinkling in distaste. But I was patient. I was relentless. I'd make a game of it. Here comes the airplane into the hangar, I'd say, swooping the spoon toward his mouth. Slowly, painstakingly, he started to eat. A sip of soup one day. 2 sips the next. I'll never forget the first time he finished a whole little bowl. He looked up at me, a shy smile on his face, a little bit of carrot on his chin. Good job, Kyle. I cheered, my heart bursting with pride. You're getting so strong. As his body healed, his spirit began to bloom. The pale, listless little boy started to disappear, replaced by a child with rosy cheeks and bright, curious eyes. We started going for short walks, then longer ones. He had energy. He wanted to run and climb and explore. One day, he was about 7. He was kicking a soccer ball around the backyard. He wasn't just kicking it. He was chasing it with a fierce determination, his laughter echoing in the afternoon air. I was sitting on the porch watching him when he turned to me, his face flushed with exertion and joy. Watch this, Aunt Brenda, he yelled, and he kicked the ball with all his might. It sailed through the air and landed right in my petunia bed. We both burst out laughing. It was in moments like that, simple, ordinary moments, that I felt the deepest joy. This was what I had fought for. This was my victory. Sometime around his 8th birthday, he started calling me Mom. It happened so naturally, I almost missed it. We were in the grocery store, and he tapped on my sleeve to get my attention. Mom, can we get the sugary cereal? He asked, pointing to a brightly colored box. I stopped the cart and looked down at him. The word just hung there in the air between us. It felt right. I smiled, my eyes welling up. No, we cannot get the sugary cereal, I said, ruffling his hair. But you can pick out any kind of fruit you want. From that day on, I was Mom. The word aunt was retired forever. We were a family. A small, unconventional, cobbled-together family, but a family nonetheless. I never remarried. I never even felt the need to date. My life was full. Raising Kyle, watching him grow from a fragile child into a strong, kind, intelligent young man, gave me a sense of purpose I had never known before. He played sports in high school. He got good grades. He had friends. He had a life. A real, vibrant, wonderful life. And it was the greatest gift I had ever been given. 15 years. It's a lifetime, isn't it? Long enough for wounds to scar over, for memories to soften at the edges. Long enough for a 5-year-old boy to become a 20-year-old man. Kyle was in his 2nd year of college, studying pre-med, of all things. He was living at home to save money, and our little house was still filled with his presents, his giant sneakers by the door, his textbooks piled on the dining table, the sound of his music drifting from his room. I was content. Truly. The anger I once felt toward Sharon and Keith had faded into a dull, distant ache. I rarely thought of them. When I did, it was with a kind of detached curiosity. I wondered what had become of them, what their lives were like, but I never had any real desire to find out. And then, one Saturday afternoon, the past came crashing into my present. I was at the supermarket, in the dairy aisle, trying to decide between whole milk and 2%. It was a completely ordinary moment on a completely ordinary day. "Brenda, is that you?" The voice was older, a little raspier, but I knew it instantly. A cold shock went through me, so intense I felt my fingers go numb. I froze, my hand hovering over the milk cartons. Slowly, I turned around. It was her. Sharon. She was heavier, with fine lines etched around her eyes and mouth. Her once bright blonde hair was now a brassy, faded color. But it was unmistakably her. She was smiling, a bright, cheerful smile, as if we'd just seen each other last week at a family barbecue. "Sharon," I said. My voice was stiff, foreign in my own ears. "I knew it was you," she chirped, stepping closer. A cloud of cloying, sweet perfume enveloped me. My mind went blank. All the things I had imagined saying to her if I ever saw her again, the angry accusations, the tearful questions, they all vanished. I was just paralyzed. Just then, a man walked up and put his arm around her shoulders. It was Keith. He was paunchier now, his hair thinning on top, but he had the same smug grin I remembered all too well. "Hey, what's going on?" he said. Then his eyes landed on me. His grin widened. "Wait a minute. Brenda? Well, I'll be damned." He looked me up and down. A flicker of something, pity? Contempt? In his eyes. "Well, look at you, Brenda. Time hasn't been too kind, has it?" I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. The paralysis broke, and that old, familiar rage, the one that had been dormant for so long, came roaring back to life. How dare they? How dare they stand there, smiling and joking, after what they did? After they blew up my life and left a child for dead? They stood there acting as if nothing had happened, as if 15 years of silence and pain could be wiped away with a cheerful greeting in the dairy aisle. I found my voice. It came out low and dangerous. "What do you think you're doing?" Sharon actually laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, come on, Brenda. Don't be like that. It's been 15 years. Aren't you happy to see us?" Happy? I was speechless at her audacity. Seeing the look of pure disgust on my face, she just smirked. "Don't be so mad," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Let bygones be bygones." Besides, she added, her eyes glinting with malice, "aren't you glad you got to spend all that time with Kyle? It must have been nice for you, having a kid around. Gave you something to do, right?" My blood ran cold. She was trying to frame her abandonment of her own child as a favor to me. Keith chuckled beside her, clearly enjoying my discomfort. "Yeah, Bren. How is that little brat, anyway? What was his name? Brad? Matt?" "His name is Kyle," I snapped, my voice like ice. "Right, Kyle," Sharon said, rolling her eyes. "That little failed experiment. Is he, still around?" She said it casually, as if asking about an old car that was probably in a junkyard by now. They thought he was dead. Of course they did. They had left him to die, and they had simply assumed their plan had worked. The cruelty of it took my breath away. "Still single, Brenda?" Keith chimed in, his grin widening. Guess you missed your chance to find someone else. Sharon and I, though, we're still madly in love. I didn't respond. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I just stood there, my shopping basket clutched in my hand like a shield. My silence seemed to amuse them. Are you still bitter about being left? Sharon said smugly. It's a shame, really. You can't even ask for alimony or child support anymore, can you? Statute of limitations and all that. She winked as if sharing a clever legal tip. I felt a strange sense of power in my calmness. They wanted a reaction. They wanted tears or shouting. They weren't going to get it. Well, Sharon continued, looking bored now that she wasn't getting a rise out of me. Kyle may have been a dud, but our daughter is perfectly healthy. She's a cheerleader, you know, just turned 14. That word, daughter. It caught my attention. It was the piece of information I didn't know I needed. The perfect, unexpected weapon. I turned my gaze to Keith. You have a daughter? I asked, my voice neutral. He puffed out his chest with pride. Yep, she's the cutest thing you've ever seen. Born a year after Sharon and I got together. But as he spoke, I watched Sharon's face. Her cheerful mask had slipped. She looked nervous, uncomfortable. And I knew with absolute certainty that there was more to this story. I had them. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, watching Sharon's composure crumble. So, you got pregnant right after you left, huh? I asked, my eyes locked on hers. Her expression hardened. Keith, oblivious, jumped in to defend her honor. Of course, she's mine. Like I said, born a year after we started our new life together. At his words, Sharon flinched. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. Her nervous expression told me everything. Something wasn't adding up. I took a small step back, creating distance. Well, that's questionable, Keith, I said calmly. His smile faltered. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, letting each word land with deliberate weight, that while Sharon was leaving her sick son with me, she wasn't just sitting at home grieving. She was meeting all kinds of people. Keith's face shifted from confusion to shock. He turned to Sharon. What is she talking about? I didn't let Sharon answer. I spoke directly to Keith. You want to know what I did after you two ran off? After I dealt with the initial shock of the divorce papers and the abandoned child, I hired a private investigator. Just for a month. I wanted to know what I was dealing with, and he found out a lot. Sharon's face went pale. You did what? He told me all about Sharon's afternoons off, I continued, my voice steady and cold. While you were at work, Keith, thinking she was exhausted from her job and a grieving mother, she was out having fun, going to bars, restaurants, with other men, letting them pay for her expenses. All while pretending to be a devoted mother to me, and a devoted partner to you. No way, Keith muttered, his face ashen. He looked at Sharon, who was staring at the floor. We spent weekends together. How could she have had time? During the weekdays, Keith, I explained patiently, as if to a child, while you were earning a living. I turned my attention back to Sharon. You told him you were exhausted from working for Kyle's sake, didn't you? That was a good one. Keith looked at his wife, utterly stunned. Is that true? Was I just convenient? Was I just your ATM? Sharon stayed silent, avoiding his gaze, clearly wishing the floor would swallow her whole. Let me guess, I added, my voice dangerously soft. Keith was just the most financially stable of the bunch, wasn't he? The one with a good job and a steady salary. Stop it! Sharon shouted, her eyes wide with panic. But the damage was done. Keith stared at her, anger and disbelief warring on his face. Tell me it's not true, Sharon. She didn't respond. I even have recordings, I said, delivering the final blow. It was a bluff, but they didn't know that. Conversations the investigator recorded with your friends. Where you called Keith, your ATM machine. Sharon froze, realizing the depth of her exposure. Keith looked like he was going to be sick. His voice trembled with rage. So, our daughter might not even be mine? That's ridiculous. Sharon grabbed Keith's arm, desperate. She's yours, Keith. Of course, she's yours. But her protests were weak. Her panic palpable. Keith didn't look convinced. You can easily find out, I suggested mildly. A simple DNA test would clear it all up. Sharon's face went completely white. Her confidence had crumbled to dust. No, there's no need for that. She's his daughter, she insisted frantically. But it didn't matter anymore. Her denials were meaningless. Keith's trust in her was shattered. And my work here was done. I had come for milk. I was leaving with justice. Whatever you two decide to do is your business, I said firmly, my voice cutting through Sharon's frantic protests. But remember this, I raised Kyle with love and care. And that is something you can never take away. I turned to leave, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't realized I was missing. But just as I took a step, I heard a calm, familiar voice behind me. Mom, are you ready? I turned and smiled, my heart swelling with a fierce, protective pride. Oh, Kyle, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. He walked over to me, tall and confident in a well-fitting suit. He'd just come from a university function. He put a comforting hand on my shoulder. It's okay. Let's go. Sharon and Keith stared at him, their mouths hanging open. They were struggling to reconcile the competent, healthy young man standing before them with the frail, dying child from their memories. Wait, Sharon whispered, her voice trembling as she pointed a shaky finger at him. Is that Kyle? He stood tall, his gaze steady. He looked nothing like the child she had abandoned. Yes, I said, my voice ringing with pride. This is Kyle. He's 20 now, and he's thriving. Kyle's calm, clear voice followed mine. It held no anger, only a chilling certainty. I remember everything, he said, his eyes fixed on the two people who had created him and then thrown him away. Even though I was young, I know who you two are. My biological mother and her lover. Keith recoiled as if he'd been struck. He was horrified, trying to process Kyle's composed but cutting words. But weren't you supposed to be sick? Keith stammered, looking from Kyle to me and back again. I thought you only had 6 months to live. No! I interjected, my voice sharp. Kyle was never sick with a terminal illness. That 6-month story was something Sharon made up. After she left, I took Kyle to a real hospital. The doctors diagnosed him with severe malnutrition, not some life-threatening disease. All he needed was proper food and care. Sharon's face turned a blotchy, bright red with shame and embarrassment. I tried, she muttered weakly, her voice barely a whisper. He was such a picky eater. Keith's expression twisted with disgust. Kyle eats just fine now, I said, my eyes boring into Sharon. He's healthy. He's strong. He played varsity soccer in high school. And I'm studying to become a doctor, Kyle added, his voice even. So no other kids have to go through what I did because of a parent's neglect. Sharon and Keith both gasped, shocked by how far he had come. I had no idea, Keith mumbled, looking utterly defeated. And there's no need, I said, shooting a pointed look at Sharon. For you to ever insult him again, or to call him a failed experiment. Sharon glanced away, unable to meet my eyes. The shame, finally after 15 long years, was written all over her face. The air in the supermarket aisle was thick with shattered lies. Sharon opened her mouth to speak, probably to offer up another weak excuse, but Keith cut her off. His voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. I want a divorce. Sharon's eyes widened in panic. What? No! Keith, you can't be serious, she cried, clinging to his arm. But his expression was like stone. He shook her off. After learning how you neglected your son? How you lied to me for 15 years? I can't stay with you. I can't even look at you. It's all a misunderstanding, she grew frantic, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. Brenda is twisting the truth. No, she's not, Keith said, shaking his head slowly. You treated me like an ATM. And now I see the truth. The whole ugly truth. He looked at me, his face filled with a regret that came 15 years too late. Brenda, I can never make up for what I've done. But I am truly sorry. He bowed his head, a gesture of defeat and apology. I felt nothing. The anger and betrayal I had once harbored had long since faded, replaced by the love and joy of raising Kyle. I've moved on, Keith, I said firmly. Kyle and I have our own lives now. With that, I turned back to my son. Let's go, Mom, he said, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. As we started to walk away, Sharon's trembling voice called out. Kyle! Wait! We stopped, but we didn't turn around. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I regret leaving you. I've thought about you all this time. Kyle slowly turned to face her. She took a hopeful step closer, her face streaked with tears, but he held up his hand, stopping her in her tracks. Don't, he said, his voice steady and unforgiving. I remember all the times you pushed me out of the house when strange men came over. I remember you telling me to be quiet and stay in my room. He looked her straight in the eye. And I remember the day you abandoned me. I decided then that I would never forgive you. Sharon's face turned pale. You're calling her Mom? She asked desperately, gesturing toward me. Yes, Kyle replied, without a moment's hesitation. Brenda raised me. She loved me. She saved me. She's my real mother. Sharon stood frozen, the last flicker of hope dying in her eyes. She finally understood that there was no chance of reconciliation. There was nothing left for her here. Don't ever try to see us again, Kyle said firmly. It wasn't a request. It was a command. And just like that, we walked away. We left the wreckage of their lives behind us on that cold tile floor. We never looked back. The fallout from that day in the supermarket was swift and absolute. I heard through my friend Jessica, who still had connections in my old neighborhood, that Keith followed through on his word. He hired a lawyer and demanded a DNA test for their daughter. The results came back just as I had suspected. The girl wasn't his. The divorce was brutal. Keith sued Sharon for damages, for fraud, for 15 years of lies. With my story to back him up, she didn't stand a chance. He got the house, the savings, everything. He left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the consequences of her own choices. She apparently tried to spread rumors about him, but it only backfired, leaving her completely isolated. I blocked her number and any new social media profiles she created. Our chapter was closed for good. As for Kyle and me, our lives just kept getting better. He graduated from college with honors and got into medical school. He met a wonderful young woman, and they got engaged last spring. Seeing him so happy, so successful, so full of life and love, it's a pride so deep it sometimes brings tears to my eyes. We continued living together while he finished his studies, cherishing our time as mother and son. On his 25th birthday, I took him out to a fancy restaurant, the kind of place we could never have afforded in the early years. We sat at a quiet table, the candlelight flickering between us. The waiter poured champagne into our glasses. I raised my glass. A toast, I said, my voice thick with emotion. To the incredible man you've become. To your future, to your happiness. I am so proud of you, Kyle. He clinked his glass against mine, his eyes shining. Cheers, Mom, he said, his voice full of warmth. To us. We did it. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet murmur of the restaurant, I felt a sense of peace so profound it filled every part of me. I had made the right choices. I had fought the right battles. This wonderful young man sitting across from me. This beautiful life we had built from the ashes of betrayal. This was everything I had ever wanted. This was home. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're still with me, I would love it if you could hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below. It lets me know you're here, and your support truly means the world to me. It keeps me going. And hey, what would you have done in my place? I really want to know what you think.